it takes, billions of dollars, years and years to do this safely. And as you've seen, the decision was to rush the whole thing, bypass almost everything, and start administering it into a very broad population, a global population, and do so also bypassing this key thing that we all agreed on in the Western world, at least, after World War II, called the Nuremberg Accords and the Helsinki Accords. And then in moving to the present, we call this the Common Rule, in which people have to be granted informed consent, and you absolutely cannot coerce, compel, or entice people to take an unlicensed medical product. That has just historically been off limits.
Let's just do some basic 101 stuff for a moment before we get to your red pill moment. When people are talking about vaccines and the difference between these mRNA vaccines and how we've always done vaccines previously, can you give us just like a high level version of that, and sort of when did you become concerned that there was a difference in what was going on here?
So I think what you're talking about is not what is the nature of a vaccine in terms of the technology, but rather what is the process to bring a vaccine to market. And that's typically about a 10-year timeline. To illustrate the point, the Department of Defense, if everything goes well, and it never does, is on track to have vaccines licensed for all infectious disease agents that were deployed in biowarfare up until the end of World War II. And if everything goes right, they'll have all those vaccines by 2050, a full century after the end of World War II. Okay, so we got a basically a 10-year timeline to really do it right. And that involves significant non-clinical research, toxicology, pharmacodistribution, genotoxicity, a whole bunch of things that just got blown off to make sure that it's safe enough to go into humans in the first place. And then once it's in humans, typically a vaccine goes through a very staged process of phase 1 trials, typically a couple of different phase 1 trials, phase 2 expanded trials. Phase 1 is typically just kind of preliminary estimates of safety with low numbers. Here's an important thing to know. In vaccinology, we use the rule of 3. And the way this works is if you want to detect an adverse event that occurs in 1 in 1,000 people, generally you have to test 3,000 people. If you want to detect something that happens 1 in 30, okay, or 1 in 10, I was going to say 1 in 10, then you'd have to test 30 people. Okay, so that's kind of phase 1 trial level. 1 in 10 is stuff that happens a lot, pretty much to everybody, right? 1 in 1,000 is something that matters a lot if you're going to be administering it to large populations, which generally is the case with vaccines, unless you're talking about special forces or something for some obscure pathogen. And then when you really get to global deployment or national deployment, you want to have sample sizes in the kind of 300,000 range. This is what the FDA has typically required in the past for new adjuvants, for example, for a vaccine. But in this case, kind of all the rules went out the door in the rush, in all the fear that was actively promoted. And so when you do it that stepwise fashion, and then typically what happens is you first kind of move it forward in healthy, normal adults because they have lowest risks. They can handle insults, biologic insults best. And then you move to elderly people and special populations like immunosuppressed and those kinds of things. And you do a step down into the little babies. Okay, so first you do adolescents, and then you do young adults, and you do adolescents, then you do children, then you do young, very young, and then you can go down to neonates if you have to. So that's the general process, and to do all that takes an enormous amount of time. And the cost per subject for a well-run trial is something. It starts at about 10,000 per person generally. If you really mind your nickels, you can get it down to about 5,000 or 8,000 per person, and it goes up to about 30,000 or 40,000 per person. So you can do the math, and you quickly come up to some serious cash. Mm-hmm. So it takes billions of dollars, years and years to do this safely. And as you've seen, the decision was to rush the whole thing, bypass almost everything, and start administering it into a very broad population, a global population, and do so also bypassing this key thing that we all agreed on in the Western world, at least, after World War II, called the Nuremberg Accords and the Helsinki Accords. And then in moving to the present, we call this the Common Rule, in which people have to be granted informed consent, and you absolutely cannot coerce, compel, or entice people to take an unlicensed medical product. That has just historically been off limits. We all agreed, nope, Germans did that. Everybody thinks about what happened in Nazi Germany. The story of what happened in Japan is even uglier. The Japanese biowarfare program was, truly atrocious in terms of the bioethics. And as I guess Bobby is going to point out in his next book,
Bobby Kennedy.
Just like we imported a lot of the rocket scientists to launch NASA, so to speak, we imported both German, but particularly the Japanese biowarfare experts and the records associated with that up to Fort Detrick in Frederick, Maryland, to launch our biowarfare program, which after Nixon made the determination that we were going to put in place the biowarfare treaty, got transformed into a biodefense program, the same people doing the same stuff pretty much. And that's kind of where that's all gone. It's not a pretty picture. And the deeper you look into it, and the biolabs that we set up in Georgia, the former Soviet state, and then presumably the biolabs that we set up in Ukraine, those offshore biolabs have a long, rich history of ethical abuses, let's say, gently. So it's a mixed bag here. There's a lot of I do believe that there is an unmet need. And that was the logic for advancing the RNA tech in theory, was there absolutely is an unmet need for ability to respond rapidly to engineered pathogens and emerging infectious disease. But I think personally that what's been done will basically destroy global public confidence in any of this kind of activity for the foreseeable future.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of mindless drivel, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.